Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. So this video is the beginning of a little series. In the next couple of videos we will slowly but surely build a wardrobe for beginners. So what does this mean? This means that the pattern I have selected are very simple and I will explain them in depth. I will also not use any fancy tools, so no overlocker for example. In this video we will begin with some basic sewing knowledge, basic pattern knowledge, and we will create a nice reversible bag together. So let's talk tools first. There are lots and sometimes very helpful tools for sewing, but when you're starting out I would say this is what you really need, beside a sewing machine and an iron. So why do I have 3 pairs of scissors here? So a nice sharp pair of fabric scissors is your very most important tool. It is so important actually that you don't want to cut anything else except fabric with this, so I included a second pair of scissors for cutting paper, like your sewing patterns. And this little thing here, I decided to include this in my basic list because it is really helpful for working with details. You might not need this at the very beginning, but I would suggest you get this quite early in your sewing career. And here I have some measuring tape for taking your body measurements or your fabric measurements. And here I have a seam ripper, which is used to undo seams which are not quite right. This happens to everyone, so get yourself a nice pair of seam rippers. And we need something to mark the fabric with, so I have here some tailor's chalk. There are special pens which can be erased by applying heat, for example. You can use both. And of course we need some pins, some bendy pins actually. No, they don't need to be bendy, they're just bendy because I used them. And you need some hand sewing needles and a couple of safety pins. And this is all I would say you really need. The pattern for the reversible bag can be downloaded on my website for free. That's dressdeveloper.de. Then patterns. And here you have the bag marigold. Click on create pattern. And here you can set the width and height for the bag like you want to. I will just create this like it is suggested. I will add seam allowance, 1.5 centimeters. You can add less or even none if you want. Paper format DIN A4 is fine for me. Then I click on create pattern. And here I have 2 links. The first one here below is the cover, nifty for pattern storage. Here you have an overview over the measurements you entered and the pattern parts. So this is the pattern itself. This is just a printing layout. So you see here it is divided in different pages. And this is a preview of the second file. So you know how to assemble the second file. I need to create this again. And here, come on, here's the pattern itself. And here I have multiple DIN A4 pages, which I can now print and cut and assemble, which we will do now. Here I have a pattern printed out. This is the cover. And as a reminder, this is the printing layout. And here are the pages with the pattern, which I will need to cut. So you can actually cut one of the long and one of the short pages and assemble the pages into one big pattern before you cut it out. It's possible, but with this pattern, this will work pretty fine. When you have a larger pattern, you end up with a gigantic piece of paper in the end. So I like to cut the pattern pieces out from the beginning. Come on, like this. And leave the addition on one top, on one side, and then I can glue these together like this. So let's cut everything out. Oh, here I see something I completely forgot. On one of your pattern pieces, you always have this little control square. It's actually located on 2 pages here. This belongs to the control square. And when you print the pattern, you need to print it at 100%. And you can control this by measuring this little square here. It should be 5 centimeters. That begins here, in both directions. So this is important. Always check the control square before you start cutting it, actually. Would be a better idea. Now that we have assembled our pattern, let's have a closer look. So we have 2 pattern pieces. This is the handle, and this is the main back piece. So you will notice some markings on this pattern, and I will walk you through this quite quickly. You have these little diamond shapes here. These indicates notches. So these notches are markings you will need later on when you assemble the pieces, and you cut these into the seam allowance. You can cut a triangle at the outside, you can cut a little triangle on the inside of a seam allowance, or you can just cut a little slit here. These markings are easier to follow than marking with a tailor's chalk, for example. And here you have the grain line indicated. So what is the grain line? Let's have a look at our fabric here. So when the fabric is woven or knitted, it runs through the machine in a direction, and the direction lies parallel to the edge of the fabric. This little fluffy bits. Here is the edge of the fabric. We call this the selvage. And this is the direction in which the fabric was run through the machine while being woven. So this is the grain line. And we want to line up this double arrow with the grain line of the fabric, which means that the pattern piece will be placed on the fabric parallel to the selvage in this case. And here you have also the indication of cut 4, which means that you need to cut 4 pattern pieces out of your fabric. I'm going to make the outside and the inside out of different fabrics, so I will cut one set of 2 out of one fabric and another set of 2 out of a different fabric. Let me pause the video here because I totally forgot to tell you something. You heard me mention the seam allowance before. Now what is a seam allowance? If you would sew right on the edge of your fabric, the stitches would simply rip out. You need a little bit of extra fabric, so the stitches have something to grip on. This extra bit is the seam allowance. In the pattern you see a line running all around at about 1.5 centimeters to the inside, and this is the stitching line. That's right where my finger is, and you will stitch along this line while the 1.5 centimeters outside this line is the seam allowance. So, back to the video. I've selected these 2 fabrics for my back. So I have a thick and sturdy woven fabric with this nice little stars on it, and a thinner one, but also without stretch, with this little floral design. And I will cut 2 pattern pieces out of this and 2 pattern pieces out of that. And then I will sew them together so that the inside is one color and the outside is the different color. So while we're speaking of fabric, come on. So you will notice that one side of a fabric is not printed. This side is printed, this side is just white with shining through of the colors. So this side is what we call the wrong side of a fabric, and this side is the right side of a fabric. Sometimes you also say right side and left side. I prefer wrong side. So while cutting out, you usually cut from the wrong side, except when you have a very nice pattern and you want to match up this pattern. You might want to cut from the right side in this case. This fabric too has a wrong side and a right side. So let's cut our back out. So I will pin the pattern to the fabric, which I folded in half so that I can cut both pieces in one go. Pinning all around. And here for the handle. And you see, the handle is a bit too long for my fabric, so I will need to piece that. not a big problem. You know what? I will just fold this in half and cut it twice. And then I can sew these together. And because I folded this in half, I need to add some seam allowance. I'm eyeballing this. Should be fine. I'm gonna cut here. Now, take my fabric scissors and cut everything out. And don't forget to cut a second piece for the handle. Just pin it a second time. And then I can cut a second piece. And now I repeat this for the second fabric. So again, here is the selvage. So the grain line is in this direction. And we place our pattern piece accordingly. Selvage, grain line. There's one pin left. And where we have our 4 back pieces and our handle pieces. So now the first thing I will do is prepare the straps, which does mean I need to piece these together at first. So I will pin these. And then I will sew along this edge so that we have a nice pair of handle pieces to work with. And one thing I nearly forgot, the notches. I am just going to cut some snips here in the seam allowance so I can find the notches later on. I am using the default straight stitch of my machine for this, and you will notice that I go some stitches and then go back some stitches at the beginning and the end of each stitching line. This is called back tacking, and it makes sure that your stitches don't come loose again. So now I have pieced my handles. I can fold this over. And now I'm going to join one of the dark blue with one of the light blue. So I will lay the fabric on top of each other, and the right side of the fabric is facing each other. So, and like this. I will pin this. And here, where I have pieced this, better this side around, I will press the seam allowance open. Just with my fingers, that's enough. On the other side the same. Nice and flat. And then I will sew the long sides. Could you have seen this? My head was probably in the way. I'm sorry. So you sew the long sides on both pieces, not the short, the long sides, with a nice straight stitch. So now I have my two handles here, and right now they don't look very pretty because the inside, because they're turned inside out. So I want to change this, and first step for that is to trim the seam allowance back to about 5 millimeters. And now I need to turn these strips inside out so that the nice right side is facing to the outside. So I'm going to use a safety pin for this. So I'm basically pin it to both sides of the fabric And then I need to wiggle with safety pin into the opening of the fabric, like this. And then I move the safety pin through the fabric and pull the end out. This is a little bit fiddly at the beginning, but slowly but surely this will work. Here we are, the outside. There. This fabric frays like nobody's business. Good that we line everything. Good. Come out. Okay, there we go. So I can take the safety pin out. And where we have a very crumbly handle. So this is so crumbly that I will take this to my ironing board and press this flat. I will do the second strip and I will see you then in a minute.
When I finish the handles with some top stitching. This means I stitch a straight line with a slightly increased stitch length right along the edge. Note that I don't pull the fabric with force, I let the machine do the work and simply and softly guide the fabric with my fingers here. This way I receive a very nice, neat straight line of stitching.
Okay, so now that we have our neatly finished straps or handles, we can attach these to our bag. So remember these little notches, I nearly forget. we will need this now. And I have here a floral design, and I will put the floral design of the handle down right here at the notch. I will pin this from the top, and then I turn this around and pin this again on the outside of a second notch. So make sure your handle is not twisted. This is how it should look. And I will repeat this for the second piece. So here's the notch. Place the handle on the outside. And the second side beside the second notch. Like this. And after that, I can place the second back piece on top so that the stars are facing the stars of the handles. I will pin this again from the top. And a second one, same. And you can use the notches to line this up perfectly. Notch on notch. Okay, now we will sew this on this edge, but for one of the two pieces we will not sew all the way through, but stop at the handles. So you sew over the handle so that the handle is fixed in place, and then you stop at the notch. You back tack, and then you begin at the second notch, back tack, and sew the rest. So this stays open. Don't sew it.
I make sure that the handles stay nicely aligned. I want a 90-degree angle to the edge. Here you can see I stop after the first handle, and then I start again at the second handle. And here you see the opening. Then the seam allowance gets pressed open.
Okay, now we have two back pieces with both colors each, and I will place them right sides facing together, flower side to flower side, and the stars to the stars. Okay, I want to make sure that these edges line up as good as I can. I'm using 2 pins to hold the seam allowance down. Now, because we have the handles in it, you cannot expect that it lays flat. Here are the handles. But we do our best to line everything up. The corners here. I'm pinning all around. Okay, so now I will sew this. I will sew the long sides, both, and the short sides, also on both sides. But I will leave these little corners here open for the moment. That is the next step. So, onto our sewing machine.
The seam allowance then gets pressed open again. Well, to my best abilities, it's not that easy now that the bag is halfway assembled, but it works.
So what's left now are the corners, and we will pull these apart and fold the seam allowances together nice and flat and pin this in place. And this technique is what gives the bag its volume, because we will then sew here, and then we have something that resembles a bag. Let me show you again. I take the fabric in the corners and I pull it to the outside. Then I bring the seam allowances together and I pin it. We will sew here.
Make sure to sew right up to the edge and back tack. Very important here, because this corner needs to be strong.
I will now cut the seam allowance in the corners back a bit, just a bit, so that they are not so bulky. This fabric is the worst. Seriously. If you have a fabric that frays that much, it's usually a good idea to line this, which we did with our bag. So everything should be fine once we finish this. Okay, it should be all, I think so. And now we need to turn everything inside out. So we have our opening here. And I will just grab into and pull everything out. Okay, nice. And then push the bags inside each other. So one bag becomes the outside and one bag becomes the inside. Let's cut this quick. Nice. Now we have a bag. So let's give this a good press at the ironing board, and then we will come back for a very last step.
And this last step is top stitching all around the bag opening. This step will reinforce the handles, stabilize the top, and close the opening we left between the handles to turn everything inside out. Then I'm left with some loose thread ends. I use a hand sewing needle to pull the threads from the outside to the inside. Then I knot the thread off and bury the thread in the fabric. And then we are done. Congratulations on your new reversible bag! For size reference, this bag fits 2 big puzzle boxes. Why I measure in puzzle boxes? Well, because I can. And if you, one day, you get bored with your bag, simply turn it to the other side and enjoy a new, very different look. I hope you enjoyed this little video and you find it helpful. Stay tuned for the next video in this little series. Until then, see ya!